VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Well, thank you, Gordon, and welcome to Crosstalk, where we're going to spend a few minutes, like 53 of them, and talking about some vital issues that I think you'll find very important to you. Before we get into what we're going to be talking about today, I want to say a big thanks to one of our field engineers, Rod Rogers, who got things squared away on one of our stations there, where some of the new equipment that's required for the new EAS system, getting things all lined up and working, it's a big job, and we're very grateful for our field engineers. And I just received a call from our chief engineer. He said, tell Rod thank you for a job well done. Also, to those listening in the VCY network area, on Sunday night, that's coming up, this coming Sunday night, November 13th, at 6 p.m., we're looking for, no, not this coming Sunday night, the 13th. I better get this straight. It's the 13th. It's next Sunday night. We're going to be at the Cook Baptist Church in Cook, Minnesota, for a Sunday night Singspiration, November 13th at 6 p.m. And I hope to meet many of you who are in the listening area, and I would love to share with you as we lead the many people in the songs and hymns and gospel songs that in many ways have been put on the shelf, or we're going to take them down off the shelf and sing them and try to lift the roof off the church, okay? That's November 13th at 6 p.m. And for more information, if you're in the Minnesota area, the telephone number is 218-666-5979. And they can give you more information about how to get there if you're in the remote areas. Also, Viroqua, Wisconsin, we're having a Singspiration Sunday night, November the 20th at 7 p.m. at the Bad Axe Independent Lutheran Church, a very independent church and very unique. And Don Graven, the pastor there, we've been there, this is our third year now, and we're looking forward to a great time there. Located 10 miles west of Viroqua on State Highway 56, and then 3 miles south on County Road N. If you want more information about that event coming up on the 20th of November, 608-637-6692. Okay, boy, do I have a stack of things to talk about. Jim Schneider walked up to me and said, "Here, Vic, there's so much going on in our country, it's unbelievable. In fact, I don't think we're going to talk about all of the stuff. But haven't we, with great interest, followed this Occupy stuff that's been going on?" Occupy. I'm occupying Studio E today. And I look through the glass and see Aaron Schneider. He's occupying the producer's room with the glass plate in between us. And up on third floor, we have studios A, B, and C, and in some of those studios, it's being occupied. But this issue of Occupy and Wall Street, of all things, where did this movement come from? Well, we have a lot of things in our culture that become copycat. Of course, we saw what happened in Egypt. And somehow the idea spreads. It's almost like other people catching a cold. But suddenly the idea of, let's demonstrate. Well, it's kind of humorous as I was watching some of the news clips coming out of Wall Street occupation there. And the cameraman was asking the question of those, why are you here? Well, we're not sure. We're not sure, but we're occupying. Well, we're finding out that there's some interesting information behind this Occupy stuff and where it came from. First of all, Life News reports this. Yesterday, Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider, joined a coalition of left-wing groups in Florida to protest pro-life Republican Governor Rick Scott and to show support for the large Occupy Wall Street movement taking place nationwide. Awake the State, which organized the rally, was accompanied by Planned Parenthood and Occupy Orlando at Senator Beth Johnson Park to stand in solidarity with the Occupy Wall Street and the larger Occupy movement against corporate greed and government control. Now, in an email to supporters, Planned Parenthood noted that they strongly opposed 18 pro-life bills that have been filed since Governor Scott took office in January. And Planned Parenthood accused pro-life Florida lawmakers of playing politics with women's health by introducing legislation that allows government bureaucrats to interfere with decisions that should be made by a woman in conjunction with her doctor, her family, and her faith. Some of the measures signed into law by Governor Scott include allowing a woman that opportunity to view an ultrasound prior to an abortion, strengthening Florida's parental notification law, and prohibiting taxpayer funding of abortion in healthcare exchanges established by Obamacare. Now, the Occupy Wall Street movement has become the subject of public skepticism after numerous well-documented cases of anti-Semitism, sexual assault, drug abuse, and I'm not going to even read this line because it describes in vile language what's been going on: public defecation, vandalism, and violence, people living like animals in tents, the refuse piled around, the stench almost to the place where people cannot stand it. All of this, Occupy. Well, that's Planned Parenthood, and it appears they have some connections, but it's not just Planned Parenthood. That's going to shock you. Would you believe, I mean, I've purchased suits at Men's Warehouse. Many of you men have. At least I used to buy things there, at least as a result of reading this article. It's got me bewildered. It said, picture of the day, Men's Warehouse stands with Occupy Wall Street. And it says, we stand with the 99%, closed Wednesday, November the 2nd. And you're going to like the way you look, protesting income disparity in Oakland. The Men's Warehouse store guarantees it. Occupy Oakland has called for a citywide strike and rally on Wednesday to protest income inequality. Figure that out. And several businesses, including Men's Warehouse and the Grand Lake Movie House, have closed their doors in support of Oakland Tribune reporter Matt O'Brien tweeted the above photo of the shuttered men's clothing store. The store's decision will likely meet with the approval of the corporate group. The founder, chairman of Men's Warehouse, has repeatedly donated to Democratic candidates in multiple election cycles. And it says here Zimmer is among the nation's biggest donors supporting the movement to legalize marijuana. Men's Warehouse promoting and supporting legalizing marijuana. Last year, he donated $70,000 to support Proposition 19, the ballot measure to legalize pot in California. Interesting stuff. Well, we're talking about this Occupy stuff. And there's an Obama advisor who urges actual militancy in nationwide Occupy protests, militant attitudes. The board member of groups that crafted laws for health care stimulus say we've got to start a resistance movement. Well, let's go to New York. This is written by Aaron Klein. 3 days before an occupancy of Oakland, it turned violent. United Steelworkers International protest Leo Gerard, an advisor to President Obama, called for more militancy in the Occupy movements across the U.S. Gerard serves on the board of a number of groups funded by billionaire George Soros, including organizations that reportedly helped to craft Obama's stimulus and health care laws. And in an interview with the progressive radio host Ed Schultz on Monday, Gerard said, I think what we need is more militancy. Now, those are code words. No, it's just coming right straight out and saying it. He said, I think we've got to start a resistance movement. If Wall Street occupation doesn't get the message, I think we've got to start blockading bridges and doing that kind of stuff, according to the transcript that was provided by newsbusters.org. And as WorldNet Daily was the first to report the tactic of blocking bridges and already used by the Occupy Wall Street to hold up the Brooklyn Bridge last month, was institutionalized by Stephen Lerner, a controversial anti-capitalist organizer. Lerner had visited the White House 4 times while his boss, Andy Stern, recently retired president, was the most frequent White House visitor in 2009. Interesting stuff. Where is all of this Occupy business coming from? Well, I know this, that the Bible says to Christians that we are to occupy till the Lord comes. So occupying is not new. It's not something that was just discovered. And from a scriptural standpoint, it's the right thing to do as Christians. But occupying means that we don't just get run over by a steamroller or we hide in a corner somewhere, but occupancy means that we function. Just thought I'd mention that. By the way, remember that organization called A.C.O.R.N? A.C.O.R.N, sure you do. These were the people that were out there registering voters, and some of them, somebody said that they had an assurance. This is meant to be humorous today. They had an assurance that Osama bin Laden and Gaddafi are dead. They've certified it because they've turned up in Chicago as registered voters. Now, I'm saying that tongue-in-cheek, of course. But the issue of what's going on here with the registration of voters and this organization called A.C.O.R.N, which A.C.O.R.N, let's see, that's a nut, isn't it? I think so. But it says here, A.C.O.R.N officials scrambled, firing workers and shredding documents after exposed as players behind the Occupy Wall Street protests. Would you believe it? Here it is. Here's the article by Jana Winter from Fox News. Officials with the revamped A.C.O.R.N office in New York, operating as New York Communities for Change, they just changed the name, have fired staff and shredded reams. A ream is 500 sheets, so they have shredded reams of documents and told workers to blame disgruntled ex-employees for leaking information in an effort to explain away a Fox News.com report last week on the group's involvement in Occupy Wall Street protests. Now, in New York City, they also are installing surveillance cameras and recording devices at its Brooklyn office, would you believe, removing or packing away supplies bearing the name A.C.O.R.N. Anything that identifies with A.C.O.R.N is getting put undercover, and handing out photos of Fox News staff with a stern warning not to talk to any of these people if they look like they're coming from Fox. Well, so much for A.C.O.R.N. You know, I thought those people went off the charts, but all they did was put on a disguise, and they're out there. We'll be right back with more of this insanity.
Back to Genesis with creation researcher Dr. John Morris. Dr. Morris, did God create the continents as they appear today?
No, he didn't, Chris. The continents are very different from the way they were originally. The continents we have today were remolded and reshaped by the great flood of Noah's day. Actually, they are the result of that great flood. The flood of Noah's day would have laid down many, many layers of sediments, which have now hardened into sedimentary rock. And those sediments then, at the end of the flood, could buckle up into the continents and mountain chains that we see today, and even rapidly move to their present locations. The Bible tells us that the world before the flood was totally destroyed, and it's no longer here. What we look at now is a destroyed remnant of that created world. We can read about that flood back in Genesis.
For a free booklet that contains one scientist's testimony to the validity of creation, please call us. We'll send you The Wonder of It All when you call 1-800-7-GENESIS. It's free of charge.
And welcome back to Crosstalk, where we're covering much of the strange and bizarre news that's happened over the past week and kind of cleaning the desk off for the next week's information. Yesterday we had the privilege of talking with Ed Decker, a man who for 20 years of his life was a Mormon, deeply involved in the Melchizedek priesthood and the Mormon theology. And he said, Vic, I was on a couple weeks ago with you. And he says, since that time, I have received, in fact, as we were on the air, he got about 200 to 300 contacts just while we were on the air. And he said, Vic, according to the counter, we have received, since that first broadcast a couple weeks ago, over 45,000 hits. 45,000 people have contacted that website, saintsalive.com. and checked on the issue of Mormonism. And folks, I will tell you that honestly, I believe many of you do not know what Mormons believe. Really. You've never taken the time to find out or never read up on it. And we are still, if I don't spill things here in the studio, we are still making available the book called The God Makers for a donation of $17 to Crosstalk. This book is, over 300,000 copies, and this is an updated version. The God Makers, Ed Decker and Dave Hunt, have put together a 290-page book dealing, and this is documented. It has footnotes. This is talking about the lying prophets and the apostles that are out there, angel stories and things that come from the teachings of the Mormon Church. But you see, there are many of you listening today. If I walked into your room and I said, now, tell me 5 things that you know about Mormonism. Well, probably many of you would say, well, I understand that Mormons believe that Jesus and Satan are brothers. Yeah, you're right. But what about the rest? And may I say this in kindness to many of our church leaders and pastors today? Pastors, take the time to educate your congregations as to what these organizations teach. Because one of the biggest defectors into Mormonism today has been identified out of the Southern Baptist churches in America. I kid you not. The reports, Brandon has shared this on his show. And if we do not know what the cults teach, you can easily be sucked into it, and the vortex of some of these teachings can literally destroy the very foundations of your faith. Now, it's up to you, but I would hope that many of you would call even today. Mary's at the switchboard. We'll take as many calls as we can to get a copy of the book, The God Makers, and a gift to Crosstalk for $17, which helps us to maintain the big satellite dish, our big $10,000 a month satellite dish. That's what it costs us to beam our signal out into space. And we're not trying to raise funds for us, but the donations that come in just help us to stay on the air. And also, the most important thing you can do is support your local station, because they give us the airtime that keeps us on your station. So primarily, and first off, make sure that you're supporting your local station, okay? Now, there's new stuff coming out. We've talked about euthanasia. And, of course, if anybody has been well known for the passing out of lethal orange juice and stuff to the elderly, it's in the Holland, and some of the Holland medical standards are rather shocking in the Netherlands. But here's an article, Stephen Ertelt from Life News. The Dutch Medical Association is seeking to expand the practice of euthanasia in the Netherlands. I'm going to repeat that line. The Dutch Medical Association is seeking to expand the practice of euthanasia in the Netherlands to include more people under the unbearable suffering area that allows physicians to kill patients and the elderly. The Dutch radio worldwide reports, until now, factors such as income or a patient's social life played almost no role when patients were considering euthanasia's requests. However, the new guidelines will certainly change that, After almost a year of discussions, the KNMG has published a paper which says a combination of social factors and diseases and ailments that are not terminal may also qualify as unbearable and lasting suffering under the Euthanasia Act. The idea is generating a strong response from pro-life advocates upset that people are already targeted for euthanasia. The culture of death is vicious. Once it begins to feed, it is never satisfied. The categories of the killable, never finally enough. Wesley Smith said that, an attorney and a bioethicist in the United States. Another is a very long series of cases in point that he has been reporting on for nearly 20 years. How can anyone say there are no slippery slopes? One of these factors includes loneliness, he said. The news report continues, as people age, many suffer from a complex array of gradually worsening problems, which can include poor eyesight, deafness, fatigue, difficulty in walking, and incontinence as well, as loss of dignity, status, financial resources, and an ever-shrinking social network, and loss of social skills. Although the accumulation of ailments and diseases is not life-threatening as such, it does have a negative impact on the quality of life and make the elderly vulnerable or fragile. Vulnerability also affects the ability to recover from illnesses and can lead to unbearable and lasting suffering. Under the Euthanasia Act, a request for euthanasia may be honored only if a patient is undergoing unbearable and lasting suffering. The KNMG now says that if non-medical factors such as income or loneliness are to be taken into consideration, other specialists must be consulted when a patient has requested euthanasia. Smith responds, "This is compassion?" Folks, what's going on in Holland, in some ways, may be going on in our country today. Well, there's a couple of other interesting items. Of course, we've just gone through the Halloween time, and interesting story here comes out of St. Louis, Missouri. A 17-year-old girl is in critical condition after she became tangled in a noose at a Halloween haunted house. Police said the girl, who was working as an actress at the attraction in St. Louis, Missouri, was found unconscious with the prop rope around her neck. The girl is thought to have fallen off a bathtub at Creepy World, where she had been working for 2 weeks. It is thought that the members of the public may have walked past her thinking she was just a scary prop. She was discovered by a colleague who was checking on the safety of employees around 8:30 p.m. last night. And Captain Ron Arnott of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office said, "We noticed a bathtub was there, and it appeared as though an individual stood up on the sides of the bathtub for whatever reason and put their head in the noose. It looks like her feet may have slipped," he told the local TV station. It is an unfortunate accident. Well, have we not talked enough about the merits and demerits of the occultic celebrations of Halloween? Enough said. But it sure is something to be concerned about. Here's one that I think we consider. Many people have said, "I want to be an organ donor. If I am in a position where my life comes to an end and someone could profit by having my kidneys or my heart or my whatever," and they have marked their driver's license as a donor. Well, LifeSite News has got an interesting story. It's a shock. Requiring death before organ donation is unnecessary, say the experts. Now listen carefully. Toronto, November 1, 2011. That's just, was it yesterday? No, 3 days ago. Here it is. Because organ donors are often alive, when their organs are harvested. The medical community should not require donors to be declared dead, but instead adopt more honest moral criteria that allows the harvesting of organs from the dying or severely injured patients with proper consent, 3 leading experts have argued. This approach, they say, would avoid claims that a donor is really dead or not really dead, which is often based on purely ideological definitions of death designed to expand the organ donor pool, and would allow organ harvesters to be more honest with the public, as well as to ensure that donors don't feel pain during the harvesting process. The chilling comments were offered by Dr. Neil Lazar, director of the Medical Surgical Intensive Care Unit at the Toronto General Hospital, Dr. Maxwell Smith of the University of Toronto, and David Rodriguez of the, a hospital in Spain, and at a U.S. bioethics conference in October, and published a recent paper in the American Journal of Bioethics. And the authors have stated frankly that under the circumstances, donors may be technically still alive when the organs are harvested, a necessary condition to produce healthy living organs. Because of this, they say that the protocol requiring a donor's death is dangerously misleading and could overlook the well-being of the donor, who may still be able to suffer during the harvesting procedure. Boy, that's a new chapter in organ donations. And have there not been some folk who have been in a critical condition and suddenly the Lord has intervened and brought them back to life? Wow, these are heavy things. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We're going to open the phone lines. In fact, we're going to do this in just a couple minutes. And if you want to get online, I'm going to hit the button and you can join us, because there are a couple more things I want to share with you. Our phone number is 800-733-9829. And you may have some other things you want to talk about as we come to the end of a crazy week here with all kinds of things happening. Wow, here's some interesting things. Judge halts plans to force nurses to do abortions. I like that report. This is by Bob Unruh of WorldNet Daily. A federal court has ruled a New Jersey hospital cannot force its nurses to assist in abortions, nor can it discriminate against them in any way until the merits of the dispute over such a requirement can be argued in a court. WorldNet Daily reported this week earlier that 12 nurses at the University of Medicine and Dentistry in New Jersey went to court because they had been told either assist in abortions, whether their religious beliefs allowed it or not, or lose their jobs. Where are we going, folks? What's going on in America? Well, what about this thing called DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act? The U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee chose today to put off until November 10th a vote on a bill that could repeal a key marriage definition law. DOMA defines what marriage really is. Senate Bill 598, the Respect Marriage Act, sponsored by Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat of California, would repeal the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, that defines marriage as a union of one man and one woman. Dianne Feinstein wants it repealed. And the Senate Judiciary Committee has put it off until November the 10th. That's just a few days away. And folks, if you want to call your senator in Washington, let me give you the phone number.
Perhaps you're a person that is active on the issues of today. And while these things are necessary, there's nothing more important than your personal relationship to Jesus Christ. Have you met Him as your personal Savior? All the issues we face on earth pale in comparison to the real issue of your relationship to God. What really matters is eternity, and we hope that you're ready for it. I'd like to send you a brochure that is absolutely free. This will help you to consider this very important matter. It's entitled, Where Will You Spend Eternity? It's brief, it's to the point, and it helps you to understand the urgency of having a personal relationship to Jesus Christ. If you'd like to receive a free copy of this pamphlet, right now pick up your phone and call 800-729-9829 and ask for the brochure. That's 800-729-9829. Call now.
And welcome back to Crosstalk here. We were speaking a moment ago about this DOMA repeal letter. That's the effort. They're trying to, in fact, it's an actual Senate bill, SB 598, the Respect of Marriage Act, and Dianne Feinstein wanted to see this thing removed so that we don't have to worry about what marriage means. And you can call your senators and let them know in Washington. The phone number in Washington is 202-224-3121. Area code 202-224-3121. Say, I want to talk to my senator or senators. And they're probably going to say, where are you calling from? And you tell them. And when you tell them where you're calling from, they know who you're sent. Even if you don't know the senator's name, they will connect you to the senator's office. And you'll have a chance to share your thoughts. The bill that spells trouble for those who believe in traditional marriage, a bill that is absolutely against traditional marriage, is that's a Senate Bill 598. The Respect of Marriage Act, sponsored, would you believe, to literally, in my book, destroy marriage. And so, if you would, simply call your senator and let them know they're going to vote on November the 10th. That's just a few days away, and they need several thousand phone calls letting your senator know that you're in defense of DOMA. You're leave it alone, don't mess with it. But if S598, sponsored by Dianne Feinstein, Democrat of California, would repeal the DOMA Act, that's going to happen unless enough people make some noises there in Washington. Well, our lines are literally jammed to the wall, and there was just a couple more quick things, and then I'm going to go right to the phones. In fact, I think I will go to the phones. Yeah, we're going to go to the phones right now because many of you have other items you want to add to the picture. And when Jim gave me the stack of things here that have been happening this week, I'll tell you, I knew I'd never get through all of them. So let's go to the phones right now. And on the road, we're going to talk to Jerry. And Jerry, I don't know where on the road means, but you're on the air.
Does Vic?
Yes, Jerry. Where are you on the road?
I'm truck driving near Whitewater.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Didn't you say that George Soros had something to do with this Wall Street sit-in?
Oh, sure. He is a financer of all of this radical stuff.
Okay. Now, figure this one out. I just heard a Sean Hannity program, and they were interviewing some people that they literally are just screaming down the Jews. They are the worst, almost like infidels. They are the worst people in the world. Unless I'm missing something, isn't George Soros Jewish?
I'm not sure, but I'll tell you this, that the shouting and screaming down the Jews is not just happening to Sean Hannity. I can't tell you how many phone calls or emails I get from so-called Christian people listening to Crosstalk that have called and call them those dirty Jews or using language that's hateful. And these are people who claim to be Christians. And I'll tell you what, this is scary days, Jerry.
Well, no kidding, because the Bible says, woe unto anyone that goes against my people Israel. And one other thing to bring to your attention, and I heard a program on this on another station in my travels. I was down in Virginia or someplace, and there is people out there, really sick, twisted people out there that are using phone numbers that are close to Christian radio station phone numbers, and it happened with your station, too.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know if you want me to give the number off the air.
No, please do not.
No, I mean, if you want me to give the number off the air, I can give it to you. Maybe you might want to check it out and find out why are they doing this.
Okay, as soon as we terminate here, stay on the line, and Aaron will take the phone number that you've got.
Okay, because you won't believe this.
Jerry, thank you so much for your call, and stay on the line. Aaron's going to pick it up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And we're going to move right along to Chattanooga, Tennessee. Wanda, how are you? I think you're listening over WDYN, correct?
Well, actually, I'm listening over the computer today because they're having a sheriff on, but I like your program, so I listen on the computer.
Well, you be sure to support your local station, too, because they're the ones that normally bring it to you.
Yes, thank you. My comment was that Huckabee said on his program the other night that he didn't think it mattered what religion they are in politics for the candidates, but I think
it does.
It's important. We think according to the way we believe, and our faith plays an important part in our thinking. Look at Obama. He doesn't have much of religion, so he's thinking anything goes. But I do think it's important, and I think Romney would be very bad for this country. He's not a Christian. I don't know who to vote for yet, but
a lot of people
Wanda,
a lot of people are scratching their head saying who and what.
Yeah.
Because it's a confusing day. Of course, whenever there's elections, you find mud flying from every direction.
Yeah.
And but I think the important thing, and I will tell you, I along with you do not agree with Mr. Huckabee. He's a talk show host on television, and apparently has no qualms about being in a rock and roll band. Right on. He claims he's a pastor. But I've met the man. He's a very pleasant man. I'm not here to attack his character, but I'll tell you what, just because somebody's got a nice name or just because they have a good personality does not qualify them to be the leader of our country.
No, and some of the others, of course, like you said, the mudslinging, I tend not to listen to what candidate A says about candidate B because it may or may not be true. But we need a good Christian man to lead our country, and I don't know where he is.
Well, we need to be praying, and the Bible says, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who will give liberally.
Yes.
And I think each and every one of us needs to pray, especially for discernment in these days. God bless you, my friend. Yes. Thanks for calling, Wanda, from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Let's go to Colorado Springs and talk with Michael. Michael, you're on the air.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your station. I tried to get through yesterday and talk to your guest, and I think he's one of the finest men I've ever personally met.
Oh, my. Ed, I'd like to have... I'm talking to Ed about possibly doing a once-a-week program on our network.
I would be very much in support of that. Now, I am currently taking a course in worldviews on a seminary, and the one thing that Christians need to come aware of is that there is no discussion or argument with people who are absolutely convinced of their worldview, because argument and discussion won't do any good. We just have to pray for them and ask the Spirit to move in their lives and move them out of the mire of untruth that they're in, and that includes our leaders, especially our leaders of this country.
Well, Michael, let me say this. I think sometimes God can use even a simple word that is said, even by someone who may not be that educated, and the Holy Spirit can take it and literally use it as an arrow into the conscience of some people.
Well, that's what happens with my street ministry and such.
Sure.
I'm just an ordinary, everyday person, and the Lord will speak to me and give me the word to speak to the person. But the argument, the discussion, the trying to change the mind from a human perspective, that's not possible. Let the Holy Spirit do the work in His time and in His place.
Michael, I'm going to tell you a little story about a young man who was in a church where they did a weeknight visitation. Every Wednesday or Thursday night, they'd go out and knock on doors in the homes around the area of the church, and they were very aggressive in witnessing for Christ. And the group of young people would do this. And there was a little fellow named Perry that was part of the group. And let's just put it this way, he was not very tactful. And he was pretty hard to train in the area of being tactful. He would just blurt out whatever popped into his head. And nobody wanted to have Perry as their partner on visitation night. But one night, one of the older fellows took Perry along, and so the first house they came to, the older gentleman introduced himself and gave them some material on the church, and then they went on and just were very kind to these people. And the next one, of course, it was Perry's turn. And Perry knocked on the door and had a tract in his hand, and the man came to the door, and Perry didn't even greet him in a cordial way. He just said, "Hey, do you want some information that tells you how to keep from going to hell and going to heaven?" And the man was irritated, and he says, "No, I don't want any information." And Perry looked him in the eye, and he said, "Well, go to hell then." And his partner was absolutely embarrassed, and they closed the door and left. Well, about a month later, this man showed up at the church. And when the invitation was given, he went forward and received Christ. And so afterwards, the pastor was saying, "Well, what was it in the message that somehow got to your..." He says, "It wasn't really the message." He said, "Several weeks ago, a young man came to my door, and he said, I was not well receiving of their comments." He says, "In fact, I told him I wasn't interested." And the young man said, "Well, go to hell then." And he said those words kept ringing and ringing in my mind over and over. And he said, "I couldn't sleep." And he says, "That's why I came to the church, because I didn't want to go to hell. I wanted to know that my sins were forgiven." And sometimes God can even take a phrase, just a sentence, and use it to touch the lives of people like Perry. Thank you so much, Michael. Got to move along from Colorado Springs, Pensacola, Florida. And Patrick, you are on the air.
Yes, sir. I want to comment on the euthanasia issue.
Yes.
I want to tell you, all the listeners, about a very, very good book. It's called Fighting for Dear Life. It's the untold story of Terry Shiloh and what it means for all of us. It's by the attorney who fought for Terry's life. His name's David Gibbs, with Bob DeMoss. And it was written by Bethany House Publication. And I'll tell you, when you read this book, it will... what I can say is that it will not only open your eyes, but it will really astound you at how the media and her husband kept the truth from the public. They said that she was in a permanent vegetative state, and this guy was in the room with her, along with the parents, for a number of months, and that is so far from the truth. She was not a vegetable at all.
Patrick, we as a station and a network, for many, many weeks, in the very early days of that issue, were privileged to get that information out across the nation and to many in Florida as well. As David Gibbs, whom I know quite well, as an attorney, fine man and loves the Lord, they endeavored to take the steps to protect Terry's life. But as you saw, the wheels of so-called justice ground to a halt, and Terry was taken. But this is the kind of stuff that's going on, and life is cheap when the standards of God are missing.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Patrick, thanks so much for calling from Pensacola, Florida. We're going to move along here in just a few minutes. Just want to remind you, as you're listening to Crosstalk, that we come your way every day here at 2 o'clock Central Time. And again, be sure to support your local stations. They are the ones that make it possible for VCY America to be on the air. And so your contributions to your local station are needed. Be faithful and let them know. Call the managers of your station and let them know if you appreciate Crosstalk. We pray that it's a blessing, that it will challenge your hearts. And as we seek to be faithful to the Lord, we seek to get the word out. We'll be right back with the final segment, about 8 minutes. And if our lines are clear, if any more of you like to have something to say, open the phone lines right now, 800-733-9829. Be back in a minute.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewweekend.com. Today, contemplative prayer, breath prayers, centering prayers, soaking prayers, whatever you want to call it, is being promoted even inside, quote, evangelical churches, end quote. In fact, Richard Foster, a writer who teaches contemplative prayer, talks about how you can actually literally encounter Jesus. Is this biblical? No, it's not biblical at all. Nowhere in the Scriptures do we see that we are to physically encounter Jesus through our prayer life. Nowhere do we see that we're to enter into the silence, enter into the quietness, and encounter God, or encounter Jesus. In fact, 1 Peter 1 verse 8 does not say whom we see whenever we want through visualization. It says, whom having not seen you love, though you do not see him, yet believing you rejoice with joy inexpressible, full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, the salvation of your souls. End quote. Christians are not commanded to try to physically see Jesus.
And we're back with you with kind of a wrap-up of the program. Here's some more items from News, WorldNet Daily. Would you believe a bill that would allow prayer to return to the schools? A Florida lawmaker proposes provision for inspirational messages. A proposal by a Florida state lawmaker to allow inspirational messages, including prayer, on a voluntary basis at some school events, is drawing the opposition of several major lobby groups on the legislative issues, including, of course, the ACLU and the Anti-Defamation League. The proposal from Senator Gary Siplin from Orlando would allow, would you believe, he's a Democrat. He would allow districts to adopt resolutions that allow prayer of invocation or benediction at secondary school events if they are at the discretion of the student government, given by student volunteers, or do not involve school personnel. So, interesting. The criminalization of Christianity. There are a few people ready to raise their voices. Interesting enough, we have, though there's a group, the White House is moving to shore up support for embattled attorney, the Attorney General, Eric Holder, as calls for his resignation continue to grow in the light of the fast and furious gun-running scandal. 11 Republican congressmen piled on Holder on Monday, demanding that he quit, adding to 17 others who had already said that it's time for him to go, and others held off on calling for his immediate resignation, but said that he has one last chance to redeem himself when he appears before the House Judiciary Committee on December the 8th, and Holder has come under increasing fire for stonewalling at Fast and Furious. Well, Fox News, of course, today is reporting that subpoenas have been issued to the White House for documentation, even the possibility, at least discussed, of getting the president's BlackBerry. I don't know how they do that. I wonder if he knows where the erase button is. Just thought I'd raise the question. Well, let's go right now back to Pensacola, Florida, and we're going to talk with Sam. And Sam, you're on the air.
Yes. A few weeks ago, you had a program about United Nations 1992 Sustainable Agenda 21 and Sustainable Development.
Yes.
And we talked about the electric meters and that they were putting in, and gas meters that they were putting in, the smart meters. And I looked at mine, and to my surprise, they've changed my meter, and I have a smart meter that has no dials in it, just a bunch of zeros across there. What does that mean to me?
I wish I knew all this stuff. I just had the same thing happen at a piece of property we're connected with, and they said we need to change the meter because we can't read it from the street. Normally, these meters will actually transmit back into the power line a digital reading of your meter, so they don't have to have that man or lady that goes around and looks at the meter and writes the numbers down. It comes in accurately. In fact, from what I understand, that it measures every day. Every day's meter reading will be transmitted on a daily basis. So this is out there as well. Now, I asked him the question when he was installed. I said, does this smart meter mean that you can shut it off? No, he says, we can't shut this one off. He says, but it is limited to how many cubic feet it will allow to go through it. It's very limited. So it means that if you exceed its limitations, then it may be restrictive in that way.
Well,
so
I was particularly concerned because Gulf Power here, our power company in Pensacola, in June, I received a notification that in April of this year, that they were holding a meeting concerning sustainable, that old word, sustainable energy. And so that's the reason I was very concerned.
Well, up at our camp, too, we have the electric power. This was set in there like 5 years ago, that in order to get a certain rate, they had to be able to shut us off for periods of up to 45 minutes or so just to lighten the power drain, because we have one building that's totally heated by electric power. and in sub-zero temperatures and things like that, well, they shut them on and off. And some of the stuff is reasonable because you're paying the rate for it. But the question is, how far does this control thing go with the meters? And your words are well taken, my friend.
Well, thank you very much for taking my question.
Thank you for the call. McAllen, Texas, I think you're our last call. McAllen, you got about a minute.
All right. Hey, Vic, how you doing today?
Fine, sir.
I would disagree with you, of course, but there are two things that I want to commend you on. The issue, I'm a Democrat, you know that. Mm-hmm. But anybody that votes to get rid of that Defense of Marriage Act, I think we should all vote against Dianne Feinstein. If she's sponsoring that legislation, then she should be. We Democrats, we don't agree with that. And also the nurses should have a right not to do whatever their conscience, because as a Christian, you have to stand by your beliefs. So forcing things on them is against what our Constitution says. But then two things that I disagree with you on is, Vic, quoting Fox News as your sources on those information, you know better than that. You know, Fox is not going to give you a good perspective of. I mean, most of their things are going to be partially George.
Now, sir, let me, before you go now, let's argue for a minute, okay, Austin? How do I know you're correct? You're saying that. I mean, I'm just taking your word for it. Now, if they're fair, and I'm not here to promote Fox News, they say some dumb things as well, but they have both sides on most of the issues. So to say that they're not fair and balanced on discussing it, they usually have somebody on either side. So,
and I'll answer you by saying I watch Fox all the time. In fact, my wife sometimes gets upset with me because I watch Fox more than I watch it. Now, the only talk show person there is Bill O'Reilly. Tends to be sometimes. The rest of the other guys, they are not fair and balanced. I listen to their news and I've seen them talk on one. It's all Republican. And then the last comment that I wanted to make on is the lady that talked about Romney. Anybody that is not a Christian, that is not a born-again Christian, it doesn't matter what party they are, Democrat or Republican, we shouldn't even encourage it. And so I'm really dismayed by most of my Republican friends, suggesting to vote for Romney just because he's a good guy. He's not a Christian. He's a Mormon, for goodness sake, So I'd rather take Obama, who is a professing Christian, than voting a Mormon into that office.
All right. We heard from a Democrat today. and Austin, it's fair and balanced today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Okay. The final word. Thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk. Good to have you with us. Tell a friend and pray for our country. Pray for our leaders. And pray that God will give us some direction as we approach these very important days in the coming year. Thanks for joining us on Crosstalk.
Listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.